Now let's just do the little technical piece of sharing screen and so on, and into presentation mode, hopefully. Now,
okay,
we're good there, are we?
Yes.
Perfect. So thank you. Yes, I was going to speak today in relation to, and great we have such an international group of people together today. So I was going to speak from the context of some work we do with the European University Alliance that we are a member of, which would be UNIC, the UNIC European University Alliance, and our role in that, which is as part of the Centre for City Futures. And so the Centre for City Futures is really focused on this work of participation and engagement collaboration, and is aimed at really trying to create the environment that enables cities, civil society, industry, academia to work collectively on the sort of societal challenges and the issues that are really prominent to our cities, and then to really try and realise impactful solutions and that are connected with engaged research and engaged learning in our academic institutions. Okay, yeah. So in short, I suppose just a little introduction in terms of the Centre for City Futures. It really is a focus on that relationship between city and university with a real focus on impact. We're in 10 cities, and really it's essentially a large-scale trans-regional living lab. So we're missions-oriented, challenge-based, working, and this really is about trying to create a broker role between the cities and the university so that there is a one-stop shop and there's some infrastructure that allows better systemic cooperation. So a lot of the barriers we find over the course of our work can be sort of quite systematic change that's needed, and institutional silos between institutions and within institutions. So this is really trying to create that sort of systematic structural changes that can also help us work together collaboratively for the very real pressing societal challenges that I'm sure everybody is familiar with in the world that we live in today. And then a lot of that is really around then focusing on co-creation practices and skills and building capacity for transformation. So the sort of skills for working co-creation, for engaged research, for transdisciplinary working in general. And that's within our own institution, but capacity building actually also across all of the, at all levels and across all parts of our urban environments. We're in, obviously, City Futures, we have an urban focus. And then these obviously in terms of as a transnational sort of living lab approach and really focused on engaged research and open innovation for societal impact. This is really about the democratization of knowledge and innovation as well, so that we are all part of knowledge making, sense making, creating solutions. And so we use the, we consider this a quintuple helix. And actually I've moved from talking about stakeholders, in fact, to talking about actors. And then so where we are recognizing in a quintuple helix, obviously, not just the original, the kind of knowledge economy actors that might have been traditionally seen of academia, government, and industry, but broadening out to the quadruple helix, where we recognize public, civil society organizations, and citizens as being part of that process, and the quintuple helix recognizing the very real sociological need for a sociological transition. And so where the environment we actually see as a key actor and stakeholder, I suppose, in our in the work that we do. And then so just a moment to sort of refer to, I suppose, then this idea of sort of engagement and participation. And this is we find a very useful sort of illustration. It comes from Wellcome Trust Public Engagement Onion. adapted by the UCD Public Engagement Working Group. But this is where we're really moving on the right-hand side of this image slide, where we're really in sort of information dissemination and giving, and towards the centre we're moving much closer to reciprocity, to mutual value, to partnership approaches, things that have shared decision making, and very much based in action and co-producing. So, and there's merit and value, and people are operating across multiple parts of these scales, but it's really helpful to have this visual, I think, to be kind of reflecting on where we are in a process, and we can be informing and inspiring, we can be consulting, but really what we are in our work and my work, what we're really always trying to move towards is that much more genuine, deeply collaborative working, where everybody, each of the actors are genuinely partners, genuinely having reciprocal benefit and value out of the effort. So living labs, 10 universities and city partners. And yeah, I think just maybe the one thing to say on this one, I think I've covered it mostly, but just this notion then again, as I say, actors. So we're really seeing society, everybody in the city as being actors, as being change agents, as being part of the need for transformation. All of our cities, UNIC is the alliance is also rooted in these 10 cities that are post-industrial cities. And so we're in post-industrial transitions. And so really that sense that actually everybody in the city is part of the transition and the transformation. And then what I wanted to do was maybe share one particular example, because I often find in these kind of learning, capacity building type forums, what people find most valuable is the opportunity to really see first kind of concrete examples of what might be happening in other places that we can adopt or inform how we're working. So this one is working together with Cork City Council, our municipality, and what we call the LECP, which is a local economic community plan. I'll talk about that in 1 second to give you a little bit more context. But it was really a partnership approach to work with the city on this sort of 5-year policy strand, but right at the very beginning to support them as they were thinking about a consultation process, and to bring in some co-creation expertise and working to help their thinking about how they were going to consult and engage the actors in the city. So we supported the development of a toolkit for essentially building in more dialogue, more co-creation work in their consultation process. And we also then ran some dedicated co-creation sessions, and those are the ones I'll speak about a little bit now, which were kind of also then recognized nationally as part of the best practice. And in terms of this as the policy context here, and I think an important piece to note is always the sense that there is no one size fits all. And the reality of this type of working is that it is so context specific, and particularly we may have very similar large scale challenges, but in each of our local contexts we will have very different, for example, governance and policy contexts. So just to say that this one, this local and economic plan, a 6-year framework. It's a statutory mechanism, but it is also not just owned by the municipality. They are responsible for sort of helping deliver it, but it is a collaboration between the municipality and other public sector and civil society organizations, and is intended to be the primary mechanism for working collaboratively on a local level, and particularly from bringing national strategies and policies into the local context. So that was part of a local government reform, so in 2014. So even now, these kind of new approaches are part of a longer term evolution as well in terms of our local government contexts, and how that is evolving to be really bringing more collaborative practices in with communities and society. So we did a quadruple helix workshops, which were essentially a big think on Cork futures. So we used sort of co-creation methods that were underpinned by futures thinking and also by asset-based community development. I think this is really important if we're thinking about this work as well, that they're underpinned by sort of robust and evidence-informed co-creation theories, methods, evidence base. So in our case, the ones for this particular format was a co-creation workshop, quadruple helix, bringing together really key people from across those 4 different academia, public sector agencies, industry, business, as well as civil society, sort of community groups, NGOs, and we also had some spaces reserved for sort of citizens who could just apply, so it could just join the sessions as well. And what's important here, I guess, is really the sense of also that everybody in the city has some relevant expertise to bring and has relevant knowledge about the city and has relevant expertise about how the future of the city should be shaped. So it brought together over 225 people. We had over 900 hours of these diverse expertise and experience contributing to the process. And then as well, each of these sessions were also supported by UCC staff and academic staff, particularly, that would have topic and engagement expertise. So, for example, maybe with sort of academics who have a youth expertise. So in the room, they were not there as the experts, they were there as the listeners and facilitating the engagement, but they also then supported when we were gathering, collating the notes to bring in some disciplinary expertise behind then the types of topics and issues that were surfacing. And so it was really then also not just the data that was collected, which there was a huge repository of data collected, which will have a long-term value, I think, beyond just this process itself. And this is just a sense of some of the different types of data that was collected on the day in terms of hopes, concerns, success stories, as well as understanding challenges, understanding opportunities, capturing what are the key assets and gaps in the city, new ideas sort of towards innovation. We also had a session with municipal staff, which also we did a little bit of a deeper dive in terms of thinking about what are kind of some critical drivers in the city, and really pulling this together as well in terms of what are the foresights for the city as they're thinking about moving for more sustainable futures. So I suppose the essence of this, for me certainly, is around the democratic participation and that sense of us having collective deliberation and working together as a city. It really had huge value in terms of really understanding as well how people are experiencing the city, and an important piece in terms of inviting people to imagine their preferred futures. And I'll speak in a moment maybe a little about the futures thinking aspect of the method modality we were using here. But we also get a real understanding and insights on key issues that matter to people in the city, and so they could become part of identifying what are the challenges and the opportunities. And then again, deepening the mapping of the city assets, which has been a really important part as well, and working on that sort of asset-based approach and building on the strengths of the city and what's already there. We also had graphic harvesters, and so I wanted to make a little note that I think in these types of collaborative participatory practices, engagement and co-creation methods, the importance of using diverse modalities for sort of diverse thinking, diverse learning, diverse problem solving. So tapping into all of our different types of literacies in that we can have. And graphic recording is also a really wonderful live co-produced learning materials, actually. So there's a real accessible record of the dialogue that happens on the day, and which participants always find really useful and inspiring. I think it also sparks joy in the room, which is also a really important part of creating environments where people feel comfortable to talk, to debate, and to think about the kind of more difficult conversations also. I'm going very fast, so I will definitely finish before the half an hour, but I'd actually love to have a little bit of dialogue in the room after this, so I'll be open to questions, but also maybe some questions for people in the room if they're interested in sharing. But what I wanted to also highlight was, I mean, in this instance, we used kind of futures thinking, but obviously there's lots of different methods and co-creation practices out there that are kind of design-led, research-led. In this sense, in this one, we were really kind of tapping into the nature of futures thinking and that kind of key principles of futures thinking, where the future is not predictable and it's not predetermined, which means that the future can be influenced. And that changes, I think, also the framing of our conversations, because it can be a much more empowering space when we think about the future as not a determined piece, and we can think about what are possible futures, what are maybe probable futures. So we have certainly kind of key trends and drivers, but we can also think about what are our preferred futures. And then when we're thinking about that leaves us room to think about how we can navigate towards our preferred futures or desirable futures. And the UNESCO Futures Literacy is a really nice space, which just really highlights the importance of futures literacy in the world at the moment. And it says that being futures literate empowers the imagination, and it enhances our ability to prepare, recover, and invest in the face of change. And I think really a lot of what we are facing, I mean, obviously we are under the name Centre for City Futures, so we definitely have a futures focus, and I think we also need to look at to the past, but really being futures thinking is really also about understanding futures and the possibilities of the futures, and to understand what we can do in the present. And I think this sense of being able to also reimagine what our futures could be, might be, can also be incredibly positive. And I wanted to share maybe then a very small practical part of those workshops, for example, are postcards where we invited people to imagine their headlines of the future for our city. What would, what are some of the success stories they would like to see for the city in the future? So thinking ahead to 2050, if they were writing a headline about our city. And it's always remarkable to me, actually, how much insights we can glean from this, and also how it really evidences a sense of common purpose, I think, in terms of we may all have, and we certainly do when we come from our different sectors, different personal circumstances. Everybody has different drivers, motivators, perspectives, and there's a real rich diversity, a huge strength. But there is also, I think, often a very common sense of wanting to enhance, improve, have more sustainability, have less homelessness, and these are just, it might be a bit small, but I could read some out, like no one on our housing list and zero homelessness figure. So those are the types of hopes and aspirations that people in the city have, or to be the most inclusive city, or to be that sustainable Cork feeds itself. So I think these kind of tapping into what's possible can really be a really important part of working collaboratively to understand what it is we are actually really trying to impact and affect, what change we're trying to affect, whether that's in an institutional context or when we move into a wider working collaboratively across different sectors in the quadruple helix. Excuse me. So on that, what I maybe wanted to then speak to, I suppose, is leave us with as a kind of a closing note, was really around the kind of societal transitions that are really important at the moment, societal and ecological transition. And that sense of transformative potential, and speak to the leave us with, I suppose, or end my few bit of speaking with a sense of the importance of hope, actually, and that I have this beautiful quote from Rebecca Solnit, I think is a wonderful activist writer, and speaking about hope locating itself in the premises that we don't know what will happen, and it is in the spaciousness of uncertainty that there is room to act. And I think this is the space, if we are thinking about engagement and participatory practices, that we have the potential to move to very real participatory processes that do accept the uncertainty of our futures, but also through empowering people to be participative parts of a process, then they can be empowered to also be actors in that process. And Howard Zinn there, who says that we don't have to engage in grand heroic actions to participate in the process of change, and small acts, when multiplied by millions of people, can transform the world. And so I don't think this is just optimism. I don't think this is a passive gesture. I think that all of this work to enhance engagement and fora where people can truly engage and really look at what are the issues and challenges that we are trying to overcome, but that we can also stay informed, that we can listen, we can have dialogue between those different perspectives, and that in that, though, the power of hope, that we can actually collaboratively make transformative change in our communities, in our institutions, in our cities. So that, I think, is the main thing. And I work a lot at an institutional level in terms of the kind of institutional transformations that are needed to support this, which can include kind of the capacity building, cultures and mindsets to do this. And so I'm always interested in these co-learning spaces. So thank you for having me here today, and actually, as well as being open to questions, of course, I'm also really, I'd be really open to sort of maybe inviting a question to you in the audience to speak about maybe what are some of the, if we're thinking about that systemic type of change that's needed to enable participatory practices, maybe even what are some of the good examples or some of the real challenges in your own contexts, because I think this is where we can really learn and understand and get better understanding what are the systemic issues. And so then in environments like this and the wonderful CATALISI project, we can start thinking about how do we accelerate and work for that institutional transformations that can accelerate and remove barriers and accelerate good practice. So I'll stop sharing. There's a final slide that has my details on, so I can share that as well with the room or with the group afterwards. So thank you for listening.
Okay, then I would like to invite and give the floor now to our colleague from ENoLL, Mariem. And in her speech, we will specifically focus on the stakeholder engagement. This as a very important topic to understand from who is maybe more experienced in it. And yeah, Maria, maybe you can do a short presentation of what you do, and then with the stakeholder engagement presentation.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks.
Sophia. Thank you, Stefania and Chiara. I feel a bit of pressure after such great presentations. But yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Mariem Shakroun. I work for European Network of Living Labs. So we are bringing to the CATALISI project our expertise in the Living Lab approach, one of the key acceleration services in CATALISI, and I'm happy to be part of this webinar to present the stakeholder engagement as process. So I'm happy to share some steps and tools that worked with our members and that we are sharing with our members that we use in the Living Lab methodology and in the CATALISI project. And in my presentation today, I will start by introducing the process, as I said, as it's applied in the Living Lab methodology. And in the second part, I will show how this process worked in the CATALISI project, highlight the main achievements of the acting Living Labs with our higher education institutions, and reflect also on some of the challenges that we have faced during the CATALISI project. I did not ask you, do you see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So, okay, I think a lot has been already said, but a small reminder about what is stakeholder. So let's start with the definition. Stakeholders are individuals, entities, or organizations that are either directly involved in the project or affected by the activities and the results. So why are stakeholders important? Because their input can have a direct impact of the outcome of the project. So their perspectives, needs, and feedback can shape the direction and relevance of the goal and results that we are trying to achieve. And finally, stakeholders are not just those involved in one stage. They can be present throughout the project, the process from early planning to evaluation. So by identifying and engaging the right stakeholders from the beginning, we can have a meaningful and strategic stakeholder engagement process. An important terminology that comes up when we talk about the process is the quadruple helix. The quadruple helix, and I think Chiara already highlighted it, so I will be very, very quick. So we call it helix because these groups are not working separately. They are meant to interact and collaborate throughout the project. So we have the academia, of course, such as universities and research institutions. We have industry, including businesses and startups. We have the government, like public authorities and policymakers. We have, of course, a very important component is the civil society, which covers citizens, NGO, and community organization. Another important and key terminology in the stakeholder engagement is co-creation. So what is co-creation is this collaborative and participatory approach to innovation. So it brings together all the stakeholders that we just talked about to design, develop, and test new products and services or solutions. So rather than working in isolation, co-creation makes sure that different perspectives are integrated from the start. So this leads to outcomes that are not only innovative, but also relevant and widely accepted by the society. And of course, the process of co-creation can use a variety of tools and methods, and it's very important to tailor our tools to the results that we want to achieve. And why the stakeholder engagement and the quadruple helix engagement is important. So it's not a one-off activity, but it's an ongoing process. It helps build relationships over time, enabling mutual exchange of information, ideas, and perspectives. And it's very important, especially in projects where decisions affect a wide range of actors. So this engagement process allows stakeholders, whether they are citizens, businesses, public authorities, or researchers, to actively contribute to decision making. And we all know that when people feel included from the beginning, even in the problem identification, they support and their commitment is stronger and tends to grow. And here we go back to the Living Lab methodology, and when we speak about co-creation and citizen at the center of innovation, we can remember that the quadruple helix engagement is very important in the process. So here, let's take a look on the 6 key steps in the engagement process that we, as Living Lab promoter, we encourage and we recommend in the process. It's very important to keep in mind that stakeholder engagement is an ongoing and iterative process. You might move back and forth between the steps depending on the context and evolving needs. So we have identify and understand the stakeholders, and Ciara said a bit earlier, and I agree completely with her, that it seems simple, but it's not. It requires really understanding and some work. We have then the internal preparation and alignment within your institutions. The trust also is very important. We have co-creation as a 4th step, and the 2 last steps are respond and implement the ideas and insights you gathered, and then you keep evaluating and monitoring the whole stakeholder engagement process. And you can see that throughout the entire cycle, consultation is at the heart of the process. It means that you ensure that stakeholders remain informed and involved and heard at every step. So together, these steps help create a structured but flexible approach to engagement. So let's focus now on the first step. So as Akhmouche and Claverel highlight, the starting point for effective engagement is to identify who your stakeholders are. This may sound simple, as I said, but it involves several important activities. So first, you need to create a comprehensive list of stakeholders who are either affected by or involved in your project. Then categorize them based on how important they are to your project, what their level of influence, and what they expect from your initiative or project. And Bourne also suggested that it's very important to document each stakeholder's role, influence, and relationship to your organization. So this allows you to better tailor your engagement strategy and communication language as well. So by identifying names is not enough, but in order to build strong relationships, you need to be clear about your own objectives, but also about what your stakeholders needs. So some of the questions you can ask yourself when you are doing this analysis work is, what does your organization want to achieve? Which issues are you addressing? And who are the stakeholders that really matter for those goals? So finally, as Jeffrey reminds us, you need to dig deeper, go beyond labels, and understand how stakeholders make decisions, what their expectations are, and what motivates them to engage. So here we prepare the foundation for the whole process. So this identification and analysis work is very important, is the first step. It's very important, and it builds the foundation for the whole process. And also as I said, you can go back to this first step to revise based on the evolving needs of your project, but also for, I don't know, what it can happen in the society or priorities of the cities, of institutions. And here you have one of the most useful tools that we use for the to analyze the stakeholders is this matrix of power and influence. So you have the high power and highly interested people. We call them the key players. You need to involve them in the daily activities, to inform them, to consult them. We have the high power, less interested people, low power, highly interested people, and low power, less interested people. And here, if I can give an example, maybe a distant university department or NGO, not directly involved, but still affected by the outcomes. So maybe a newsletter or occasional update is usually enough. Now that we have mapped and analyzed our stakeholders, the second step in the engagement process is about preparing internally and making sure that the organization is aligned and ready to engage effectively. So here we make sure that our process is successful. We align the interests and objectives of our organization with those of our stakeholders, because we already did the analysis and the mapping in the first step. So here, what do we want to achieve? What are our key messages? And who will be responsible for engagement? And as Jeffrey points out, coordinated engagement is much more effective when there is an internal stakeholder management team in place. And I think Ciara and Stefania also mentioned about this specific department that deals with the stakeholder management. And this team helps ensure consistent communication, follows up on feedback, and connects stakeholder engagement to the organization's core processes and decisions. So at this stage, it's also important to think about motivating your stakeholder, especially those from the quadruple helix. And motivation can come from providing the right training, the right information, and showing also a stakeholder how their contribution will be valued and used. And then we have the third step, which is very important, is about building trust. So trust doesn't happen automatically. It has to be built over time, and it requires attention to key dynamics that may affect relationships. For instance, within the quadruple helix, you often find imbalances of power. A policymaker or a large company doesn't hold the same influence or speak the same language as a citizen group or small community. So this can create a sense of inequity in the collaboration, and it's very important to deal with this or to put a strategy to address this imbalance. And we also need to be aware of language and cultural barriers. We can exclude some stakeholders from the participating process. And to build the trust, it's important to identify these potential obstacles from the beginning. And here in the Living Lab experience, how we deal with this relationship building. Yeah, as I said, we need to ensure that there is an adequate information flow between different levels of the quadruple helix. It needs to be clear that while every input is welcome, we need to be honest from the beginning and transparent that due to technical or budget issue, we cannot take all the inputs into consideration. So we need to be very transparent with them in order to keep this, to maintain the trust. And citizens should also not feel discouraged when submitting their ideas and should be aware of the proper follow-up from the project owner. And of course, if a false perception on the work done by the Living Lab is given, citizens might be discouraged from expressing their opinions in further projects. So it's not enough to announce to the participants that their perspective is being heard and will in some abstract may influence future decisions, but it's very important to explain how the citizen perspective will be translated into action and how the final solution will be developed with the private sector or the Living Lab. And of course, the citizens need to understand to what extent their participation will have an impact on the solution or final products. And here we move to step 4, which is co-creation, one of the most powerful steps in stakeholder engagement process. And Ciara already presented it a bit earlier. So it's more than just collaboration. It's this process based on identified needs where different actors from the quadruple helix that we have identified come together to co-design and develop solutions. So the solution they develop or they co-design, it's done based on their knowledge, experiences, and capacities to shape outcomes that are meaningful and relevant for the challenge identified in the beginning. And the European Commission defines co-creation as knowledge flows and absorptive capacities, which simply means that all involved parties are just contributing, but also learning from one another. So it's also a multi-level process. That means it's not limited to one-off workshops or local activities, but it can span different scales from neighborhoods to institutions and help boost participation across many layers of society. So when well-designed, a co-creation process can do much more than generate a new product or idea. It can actually transform the system in which it takes place. It can change even the way people interact, make decisions, and approach challenges together. So this step is really very important, and it's very important in this step to use the right methodology, because when we, and it depends on the stage that we are going through during the process. So if we are just collecting ideas or data, it's maybe better to use surveys or questionnaire, and the tool that you use to co-design solutions might be different. So to co-design solutions or action plans, like for we did with the higher education institutions for the action plans, it was more important to do workshops in person or online to co-design together action plans and action. And then we come to the 5th step, which is respond and implement. So this is where things start to take shape. based on the feedback, data, and ideas gathered in the previous steps, we now move toward action. So we begin by creating an outline of measures to respond to the issues raised, what actions need to be taken, which suggestions should be put in priority, and we assess each action and we put in place an action plan and timeline. And of course, it's very important when we do it to communicate it to the stakeholders that were engaged in the process. And we've now reached the final step in the stakeholder engagement process, which is monitoring and evaluation. Of course, this step is very important because things can change over time and stakeholders may feel differently, have new needs, or become more or less involved. So it's very important to check in on a regular basis and see how the engagement is going. To do that, we can ask simple but important questions like, are we achieving the goal we set for stakeholder engagement? Do we have a clear idea of how things looked before and how they look now? Are stakeholders involved in the review process? Can they give feedback? Do we have a way to track and measure changes? So these are the different questions that we can ask to monitor and evaluate our engagement process. And by asking these questions, we can see what's working well and what needs to be improved. And we can adjust our approach if necessary. So in short, monitoring and evaluating help us make sure the engagement stay strategic and meaningful. So I don't know if you have any questions. So now let's move to CATALISI Acting Living Lab, so we can showcase the experience of CATALISI in this process and also the challenge of engaging with external stakeholders. So why higher education institutions are asked to act as living labs? Why the benefits of setting up permanent living labs is wider and more recognized by institutions. In the CATALISI context, we focus on the various benefits of co-creation and collaboration in multi-stakeholder team, allowing the creation of solutions aligned with stakeholder needs. So cooperating in a multi-stakeholder team makes you more inspired, learn to think out of the box, better understand each other, and work together instead of side by side. And when applied to institution transformation, the Living Lab approach can help to empower the role of universities within local innovation ecosystems in alignment with the different European strategies for the transformation of universities. So really, this approach helps them to respond in a better way to societal needs and challenges. And here we can see the quadruple helix representation that we reached in the CATALISI project. So every higher education institution applied the Living Lab methodology from the beginning to identify the challenges in terms of institutional transformation, but also to co-design strategies to address the challenges that they have identified. So here we can see from the academia, we have the students, researchers in the government, we have municipalities, government funding agencies, civil societies, we have citizen foundation, NGO, and for the industry, of course, we have startups, local small and medium enterprises, media companies. So I think for the second stage where we co-designed action plans, we reached we had more a bigger representation from the quadruple helix. And of course, the Living Lab methodology in Catalysi is a learning process. So we improve with time, and we also aim to have a better understanding beyond by the end of the project of the Living Lab methodology to be able to apply it and replicate beyond the project. And our higher education institutions, of course, in this process of engagement, they used the surveys and questionnaire, but also, and more importantly, in-person workshops to co-design action plans with the stakeholders they identified. So here we can see some images from the workshops they have organized at their universities with their stakeholders. And for Catalysi Acting Living Labs, the main achievements is the establishment of Catalysi Living Labs, 7 Acting Living Labs. We also so far organized 14 collaborative workshops. So for the exploitation phase, where we identified the challenges, 7 workshops, and 7 other workshops in the second round to co-design action plans, where overall number of the stakeholder engaged were 270, and we have co-designed 7 action plans with the higher education institutions that are now under implementation till the end of the project. So as I said, the Living Lab methodology is a learning process, ongoing learning process in Catalysi, and we can see that there is an enhanced engagement and application of the methodology. We have refined intervention areas because these stakeholders who were engaged in the process helped refine the intervention areas that were identified even before the project start, and they recognize better and more the stakeholder engagement process, the communication and co-creation processes. But alongside achievements, we have also mapped challenges, mainly in relation to the need of balancing on one side the co-creation and diversity while having to maintain a coherent approach. Stakeholder engagement as well was a key challenge, notably in selecting the right tools, overcoming language barriers, and connecting with external stakeholders. So this aspect was really challenging as well, and we will see more in detail in the next slides. And another challenge was the fragmentation and lack of mutual understanding, not only among stakeholders, but between implementers and their local stakeholders. So here, in 1 year ago, we organized this co-creative workshop with our implementers to identify the main challenges in terms of external stakeholder engagement. And we have 3 main aspects in this, which are the communication and strategic alignment and resource. So regarding the communication is the lack of tailored communication strategies per stakeholder group, the language and translation barriers, the weak trust building mechanism. And for the strategic alignment, we have this lack of alignment of priorities, stakeholders they are not involved in defining problems. So like we defined the problem within the universities, and then we brought them to co-design action plans, which was one of the challenges. And we have also these rigid engagement processes and lack of adaptability. And sorry, I forgot about the resource. Yeah, many implementers also mentioned that, okay, we understand the engagement process, but we don't have time, we don't have money, and we don't have staff. So we have this poor availability of resources, and we cannot prioritize the resources. But we organized another workshop, co-creative workshop, with one of our members, University of Timisoara, last year. Unfortunately, not everyone could attend this workshop, but Maria Carmela was there. And we tried to co-create a strategy to address these challenges of external engagement process. And UVT gave us and provided some recommendations to overcome these challenges. So when it comes to communication and trust building, one of the first things we discussed is the need to map and put in priority some of stakeholders. And we do this analysis and this matrix of influence interest. For example, at UVT, they mapped local businesses, NGO, and regional public authorities to understand who needs to be closely involved and who can be kept informed with lighter updates. Next, we saw how important it is to tailor communication to each group. This means avoiding technical and academic language. Sometimes we bring people, but we start talking in a very technical way, and it can lead to stakeholder disengagement or fatigue. So, for example, when engagement with community organizations, using more accessible terms and real-life examples can make a big difference. Another point is the importance of overcoming language barriers. So in some cases, this means translating materials. In others, it simply means using simple language to ensure that everyone can follow and contribute. So especially when engaging with non-academic and international partners. We also highlighted the need to build trust through active listening and transparent updates. At UVT, for example, one simple but very effective practice has been to send short, regular summaries after meetings to show stakeholders that their input has been heard and integrated. And finally, it was recommended setting up feedback loops so stakeholders can contribute to continue to give input throughout the process, not just at the beginning. So this could be as simple as sending out a quick survey or hosting short check-in sessions every few months. So we see that these are small actions, but they really can help to build a stronger and more inclusive relationship with external stakeholders. And in terms of aligning on priorities, so even when stakeholders are motivated and willing to collaborate, things can go off track if there is no shared understanding of the goals. That's why it's very important to take time early on the task and ask ourselves, what do we want to achieve together? Not alone, but together. So this means not just presenting your own objectives, but also listening to what matters most to your stakeholders. Because not everyone is clear on the common goals, and it can become much easier to move forward. Another key point that I already highlighted earlier is involving stakeholders in defining the problem, not just the solution, but when they help shape the challenge from the start, they feel more ownership and more likely to stay engaged throughout the process. And finally, priorities can change, so it's very useful to have regular check-ins, even simple ones, to make sure everyone is still aligned. Like a quick survey or discussion. So yeah, aligning on priority is about starting with shared goals, co-defining the challenge, and staying flexible along the way. The last aspect is resource utilization, and the key idea here is that we don't always need to work more, we need to work differently. That means making better use of the resources we already have inside of the university. And I still remember this comment from Alexandra from UVT. It's like at UVT, they did not involve more, but they started behave as a laboratory, as a living lab. So the university become a living lab in the mentality. It doesn't mean like creating a new physical lab. It means using the university everyday environment as a place to test ideas and involve stakeholders. Second, UVT suggested as well that universities put in priority resources based on impact. So instead of trying to engage everyone the same way, focus on the stakeholders who are most relevant for your goal. For example, if you are working on urban mobility, it makes more sense to work closely from the beginning with the city and transport operators than spreading resources across unrelated groups. And we also recommended promoting open science and technology transfer. This point was very important. How? By sharing research results and tools in formats that external partners can actually use. For example, this could be done through open access reports, toolkits, or joint workshops. Another point, very important, that I personally liked is the cross-departmental collaboration. For instance, the IT team might have tools that could support a citizen science project, or the business faculty could help structure partnership with external actors. So again, this isn't about adding more work, it's about connecting better and working in a different way and sharing smarter and using what we already have in a more strategic way. So this type of open approach helps research have a real world impact and of course build a connection with the stakeholder who might feel left out of the academic process. That's it from my side, and of course we can share the presentation after, and also with the report of the workshop I was talking about, where we co-created this strategy to better engage with external stakeholders. I presented the key points, but we have more detailed report that we can share. Thank you.